A warm welcome, dear viewers, to our series Visite. And at this point, many thanks for your really numerous letters. With an abundance of information, but also questions. And I then chose some of them to answer here, like today's. A young woman, 37 years old, writes that in her circle of friends, she has girlfriends who already suffer from hormonal imbalance. She's only now in her 30s. But she would actually want to think for herself in advance what leads to it and why at that age. And how is that supposed to be when you then go into a phase of life where there is really hormonal change? And that's what her question is about. I would like to answer that in order to avoid a hormonal imbalance, of course. As always in life, it's not about a hormonal imbalance. It's about everything. And it's about this one individual person. And you can't see it as destiny or your fortune, you have to understand it. And a hormonal imbalance always binds to one's own vitality. That means my own vitality to absorb the new, but also letting go of the old. And that means to digest your own life accordingly. Take a look at your friend's life and at yours. Take a look at what things may have disturbed a metabolism at the moment, even over the years, which give these two women a completely different metabolic economy. And we see in women with hormonal imbalances that almost 90% already have a slowed metabolic regulation problem for a variety of reasons, but a high and fast and too fast metabolic process, only very few have that. And therefore that's the focus, because it's also the hormonal regulation that on the other hand gets established and embedded into a huge metabolic process. And that concerns the cellular regulatory capacity of each individual cell. This not only applies to an improvement in hormone regulation in the ovaries or the cycle. So, as part of an energy deficit, for a variety of reasons that we might now want to discuss, of course, a metabolic process also slows down, and in the end it is again a problem of vitality that is slowly using up one's own reserves. The sum of all resources also eventually reaches its limits. And then the body has to keep adapting to the next problem, because of its own ability to adapt. It's not that easy when you experience stress every day, and there are differences whether I'm very happy in my relationship, feel supported, or whether I have to fight for recognition every day, whether I have a partner I can rely on, or whether I have a partner who may not always keep their word. Am I injured? Is the stress duration permanent? You can probably imagine how the energy reserves can maneuver you in a wrong direction. The other question is our metabolism is dependent on what the body is burdened with. And what do we actually not know today? The big question of environmental toxicology. This is part of life. Of every doctor who thinks holistically to also look at these things. Who am I? You may be a very good and fast detoxifier. However big your load is, you compensate. You can eliminate toxins. However, it is also possible that people's individual detoxification is weakened, that maybe a young woman was born and already has the whole toxic burden of her mother via the umbilical cord because the mother had amalgam fillings. Now, through her baby years, she might always have gotten paracetamol, which is a highly toxic liver poison. This means that the liver's detoxification capacity has already been weakened for quite a while. The toxicity of life is not considerate of that, but the girlfriend lives on a main road. You might also live in a lively city, but you have other capacities, other reserves to deal with it. You may be someone who eats consciously. The fact that our body always reflects the mirror image of our life may be far from being accepted by the other friends. How well is the body cared for in these situations, or is it unconsciously not well taken care of? Then what can it do? It can only store it. Then it can only bunker, because it can no longer get it sufficiently to the kidneys in order not to influence the metabolic processes. Detoxification plays a very important role at the moment, and today we are able to look at detoxification as well. We can do that by doing tests via the oligoscan, for example. We can do heavy metal testing, we can do DMPS chelation, just to provoke the body. We can then mobilise the toxins and we can then detect them in the urine. You can't do that directly in the blood. It's not a good blood analysis. But we are all burdened by life. And please think of all the Xeno hormones. Xeno hormones are plasticizers in all plastic toys, especially those that come from overseas. Please think it has taken us more than 20 years to get these Xeno hormones, the plasticizers, bisphenol A, out of baby bottles in Germany. It was an unbelievably long procedure. All the Tupperware. See if there's bisphenol A in it. So this boost for Xeno hormones, just the coffee machine, it dissolves. When there is water in it, it creates estrogen dominance. But now I'm someone who can't really detoxify with my liver phase 2. That means this overload causes estrogen, causes a progesterone deficiency. Now, maybe I don't need to have too much estrogen, but I have too little progesterone, or I have estrogen dominance. Maybe I also have an enzyme deficiency that breaks down the estrogen, a COMT weakness. Then, of course, this gene expression that this enzyme weakness causes in the course of my life, because the gene was switched on or remains switched off forever, but the toxicity can lead to gene expression. And now this over-estrogen, because xenohormones are not toxins, they have an estrogen-like effect. They can communicate directly with the cell in a 1-to-1 ratio with the estrogen receptor. That means there may be certain conditions with your girlfriends that provoke an estrogen dominance here. Then it's really not enough to activate the COMT alone. And also a nature identical progesterone intake or topical application of progesterone is not enough. But you have to measure it. You can measure. I was just about to say phosphates. You can measure bisphenol A. Today in laboratory analysis, every environmentally toxic laboratory, but also Biovis and Ganzimun, will do that for us. Then you know why this estrogen dominance arose. But the body that suffers from these burdens must cannibalize itself. Cannibalism is something that I don't want to say digests itself, but that from its substrate of nails, from hair, from valuable minerals, it must release silica, release calcium. It has a high proportion of valuable substance, which is used up, and of course, with it, the vitality spiral goes down. In the whole system, of course, also the hormone balance is integrated. And depending on all these things it has to take care of in that regard. I'll come back to that in a moment. Of course, we're living in a time today with a lack of micronutrient supply. And I don't want to be the one to urge everyone to take supplements. I would like people to be aware that the nutrient content today, due to a mandatory nutrition, due to the high burden since the turn of the century, the penultimate one is incredibly minimised and decimated by the massive nitrogen fertilisers. Today we can no longer cover the selenium requirement. If you eat 6 Brazil nuts a day, you can do that. Or take sodium selenite. But just not having selenium means not detoxifying optimally. The other thing is that, of course, through the entire processing, through pasteurisation, what we do with milk, that means we heat the milk for 15 to 40 seconds to 75 degrees Celsius. Then we homogenise it. That is, we put a spinning in there. We build up a pressure of 290 bar. We destroy life energy, life function. It has nothing to do with that milk was an incredibly high quality food for the children, especially after the war. But today's pasteurised milk and homogenised has nothing to do with milk. My son once said when he was little that it's a white cow's juice, and he didn't think about it in depth at that moment. But he didn't get it at home either. The other thing is that through the refining processes, that we refine oils, wheat flour, sugar, these are all industrial processes that take away the nutritional value. The good wheat, the good rice, barley, which are produced as extract flours, no longer have endosperm, but the power of a grain lies in the endosperm. But with that, I can't store it for long. This would make the grain rancid. For me, it used to be a matter of course that I would bake the bread myself, and then it was, of course, also crushed and ground and processed immediately. There was nothing at all that you might have used as a ready-made flour mixture, because it was only wheat flour or rye flour anyway. But it was always just the extract. But we're learning to live with that today, and we can only have the extracts. And the content of these high-quality minerals in the grain is, of course, massively reduced. The grain is altered by glyphosate. And we humans now have the reckoning that we see chronic silent inflammations significantly negatively affect our entire intestinal situation. Meat is eaten today, of course, but the broth is thrown away. That's a catastrophe. Especially the broth contains cysteine, methionine, glycine. This can regenerate the intestinal mucosa. This means we should bring these powerful healing soups back to the table. Especially when we have children, especially when we're in times of convalescence. Now it's winter, now the body can draw energy and strength out of these things. All of this needs a healthy balance. So when we talk about wanting to counteract a hormonal imbalance, we must be aware that we, especially as far as nutrition is concerned, have to deal with it very carefully in the future. And I believe we've already discussed these things several times, what a healthy and unencumbered diet means, which is very balanced and which actually supplies the body with everything in a good optimum. The other thing is you can't expect hormonal balance to adjust itself if your body isn't physically challenged. And it's true that in a stressful situation, I shouldn't stress myself more, and I think I have to do endurance sports. I really don't have to, but now I have to calm down. Now I have to find my way back to myself. For example, through yoga or meditation measures, through targeted strength training in moderation. I find yoga and all these things, qigong, of such high quality that can always reset a regulatory balance here. But sometimes it is also the knowledge about myself. That means, do I always too high expectations? I'm part of a meritocracy. How my own perfection manner, respectively? How is my perfection behaviour? Do I think I always want to achieve 150%? Or maybe I can and should I consider in the context of my hormonal dysregulation that I am the only one that can stop the process of self-violation. There is Professor Lothar Seiwert, and he wrote a beautiful book. This is how you become the master of your time. I once got a wonderful gift from my husband and then attended a few seminars with him. And that has changed my life quite a bit. And the basic statement he makes us aware of is that we ourselves set the priorities every day. And that is a new way of seeing with new eyes, and also wanting to understand with new eyes, is really everything a priority? Or can I find a new perspective on how I cope with my own life? And then sometimes things fall out of the daily concept where I used to spend a lot of energy. But the body finds a new balance of power. And of course, it can deal with it better. The other thing is that hormonal imbalances are caused by poor posture. What is my physical structure like? It's called posturology. The teaching of posturology is the teaching of posture. Are there hormonal processes that are triggered by mismanagement, by my posture, in the area of the lumbar spine, in the area of the thoracic spine? It's unbelievable what pain symptoms, hormonal imbalance, premenstrual syndromes, erectile dysfunction in men, prostate problems are caused by poor posture. That belongs in the hands of an osteopath. And you can treat this with targeted therapies. Our immune system can also be misdirected. There are viruses, there are bacteria, there are parasites, especially parasites that speak the language of hormones and intervene in the hormonal system. There are toxins, heavy metals, environmental toxins. We had already discussed all of that. Of course, there are also repressed traumas. We all grow up with different families. There are things that we carry with us, and not in spirit and in memory, but this information is stored unconsciously in every cell. Are there things that maybe can be processed with hypnosis? There are techniques today that can resolve these things as well. We should take care of it. Hormonal imbalance also has something to do with a lack of optimal body temperature. Our operating temperature is 36.8 to 37.3 degrees Celsius. Am I constantly hypothermic? A person with a weak metabolism, maybe with a thyroid dysfunction, can have a lower body temperature. But with this, an optimal hormone balance is lost. With this, an optimal immune balance is lost. And these are things that we should actually know. And finally, are we happy? What is it in our lives that we wish to be different, that should be different, and then not so much is causing issues because stress makes us ill? And maybe from this question, and I try to stimulate some things here because I have a great overview after over 30 years already, and there are an incredible number of people who go through in a straight line and who have no problems at all in hormonal menopause, but these problems are connected also to your own life. And so I hope I was able to give you a few pointers to be relaxed about it, also for the future. And with this in mind, I wish you all, and especially your two friends, maybe a few good thoughts to actively change something about this problem. With this in mind, I would like to thank you very much, and I am really looking forward to next week in the Visite series with you. Goodbye.